Morning, everybody. As folks are getting settled in, I'm Amy from OCCA. Actually remembered to introduce myself this morning, woohoo. And so we'll just go over a little bit of the technical aspects of things before we get started with today's awesome presentation. If you have questions throughout the presentation today, please pop them into the Q&A. We will also be sending any links, anything that needs to be shared out through the chat, but put all your questions in the Q&A. And then at the end, we will take some time to answer them. And at the very end, if folks are interested in asking your question verbally, you can use the raise hand feature and we will open up your microphone so that you can ask the presenter your questions directly. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Emily and we will get this party started.
Thanks, Amy. Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to week 8 of the 2021 Watershed Wednesday series. I'm Emily Dekar. I'm the Ag Coordinator for the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. Watershed Wednesdays are hosted by the Upper Susquehanna Coalition and the Otsego County Conservation Association. The sessions are taking place of the Upper Susquehanna Watershed Forum for 2021, just like it did for 2020. We are holding sessions every Wednesday all the way through the month of October. The full schedule is posted on the USC website and on the Facebook page. And you can also sign up for email announcements on the USC website if you're not already getting those right under the Watershed Wednesdays tab. So to get things started, our presenter today is Cassie Davis. She is a research support specialist for New York State DEC's Chesapeake Bay program. Cassie's going to give you an overview of the Upper Susquehanna Watershed Progress Dashboard. So with that, I will turn it over to Cassie.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, it's a mouthful. Upper Susquehanna Watershed Progress Dashboard. It's for the Chesapeake Bay TMDL, and it's an ArcGIS Online dashboard that I've been working on. So just a little bit of background about why it's why we have the dashboard. So it's for the Chesapeake Bay Watershed. New York is the upper portion of the watershed. It's the headwaters. And so any pollution that occurs in New York goes all the way down the Susquehanna and can impact the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So in 2010, US EPA established a pollution diet, a total maximum daily load, or a TMDL for the Chesapeake Bay for nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. And each jurisdiction is responsible for developing a watershed implementation plan. And so from the previous slide, you could see that Pennsylvania, Delaware, DC, New York, West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland are all part of this TMDL. And the current phase we're in is phase 3, and that runs us from 2018 to 2025. So this dashboard, it lets users access data relevant to the Chesapeake Bay TMDL for progress. So it looks at BMP implementation, the nutrients and sediments delivered by each sector, nutrient concentrations at the NonTitle network monitoring stations. And then it has some reference layers like our DEC biomonitoring, and then some cities, towns, other watersheds, and then some information that's important for grant application. So this is what it looks like here. I'm going to open it up in a screen in just a moment, but I just want to familiarize ourselves with once it opens up. So in the center, there's the map. And then on the right-hand side, we have our HUC-10 BMP progress serial charts and the nutrient progress serial charts, and these interact with the map. On the left-hand side, there's a legend, and then there's some selectors that are out on the outside of the page. So I'm going to open up the dashboard. So here you can see the map, and we have HUC-10 watersheds here. And then all these are able to be moved around. So the first one I'm going to focus on is the HUC-10 BMP implementation progress. And so this is data provided from the Upper Susquehanna Coalition on BMPs that are implemented in each one of these HUC-10s. And in order to select, we can zoom in to certain parts of the watershed. And then this drop down up here will interact with that zoom. So it'll only show the ones that are zoomed into. So here I'll just select the Tioga River watersheds. And you can see on the map, it's zooming in and out and selecting these. So as I select these, we can go view the BMP progress. And it's going to go from 2010, which is the start of the TMDL, to current implementation progress. So here's the scale. And then for the example, this is forest buffer. So we can zoom in on just one of these forest buffers if we wanted to look at cropland grass buffer and see the progress that's occurred in these watersheds from 2010 to 2020. We can also look at it for other BMPs. I've got a list of them here and plan on adding a few more, but Nutrient Management Corps is another BMP, and we can see the implementation in these 3 watersheds over time. And then I also included the target that's in our watershed implementation plan for Nutrient Management Corps. And we can see if I hit reset, it'll go back to all of the stations or all of the watersheds. And then we can see that progress over time and how we are getting closer to the goal. And same for cumulative buffers. I have a target here. And again, if you zoom in and select on those, it'll interact with these maps to make it select just those watersheds. And then going back to the Tioga River, I hope I'm saying that right. We can look at the HUC 10 BMP progress for 2020. So this is a table of just all the BMP implementation that's currently occurring. It's broken out into annual BMPs, which are cover crops, conservation tillage, etc., and then cumulative BMPs, which build over time because they have longer lifespans and they're in the ground for longer than cover crops. You can see soil conservation, water quality plan, acreage, and then the cropland buffers. And this is for each individual HUC. So since I selected these 3, I can scroll through up here to see these 3 in the BMP progress per year. So you can see in 2020, in this watershed, Tioga, 265 acres of cover crops were planted. And that data from the USC then gets reported to CAST. So it's also available online through the Chesapeake Assessment Scenario tool. Okay, so next I'm going to focus on the nutrient and sediment loads and nutrient concentrations. And these come from CAST again. This is the Chesapeake Assessment Scenario tool. And CAST is the model for the TMDL and the Watershed Implementation Plan. They're currently on the Phase 6 model. And so you can download Excel spreadsheets from the model. And these are the outputs of those. And I just took those nutrient delivered spreadsheets and put them into this tool where they can be more easily accessed by people. And I plan on updating this annually. So we'll look at, this is the entire nitrogen that's delivered to the Chesapeake Bay from the entire upper Susquehanna based on the CAST results. And so I have a similar tool here where I can zoom in and select, so we can zoom into a watershed, drop down from that selection, and we can hit Tioga River, and it'll tell us what the nitrogen that's delivered to the Chesapeake Bay. And I chose to do delivered instead of, there's either delivered or edge of tide. Delivered is what is actually going into the Chesapeake based on their model, versus edge of stream would be more for like local planning. And then we also have the phosphorus. So I've selected that one, so it's still selected. So it'll show the agriculture, developed, natural, wastewater, all the different sectors in their delivery. And you can hover over this to get an actual value, as well as sediment. If you don't want to interact with this pie chart, you can also click on one of these watersheds and it'll come up with a little blurb and it'll say, this is good for copy and pasting. It'll have the agricultural load, nitrogen, phosphorus, sediment, as well as the developed, natural, septic, wastewater, all of these loadings. And these are all, again, directly from CAST. All right, so that is the BMP and HUC 12. I'm going to go ahead and turn off this watershed layer, zoom out a bit. And then I'm going to focus on these non-tidal network monitoring stations. There are 6 cities within the watershed. One of them is actually outside of the watershed, but it encompasses the entirety of it. And these are USGS gauging stations that are used to track our progress, as well as the implementation and the nutrient loading in the model. And so here I'm going to look at this graph here. It's going to be a little small, but you can see this is for each gauging station, the total nitrogen concentration over time. And this is a long-term monitoring station. So it goes from 1985 all the way to 2018. This data is updated pretty much biannually. So as soon as we get the 2020, 2021 data, that'll also be incorporated into this. But you can see how we're doing at our gauge stations. And if you wanted to just focus on one, like let's say we want to look at Waverly, you can click on it and it'll isolate just that one watershed. And you can also click on another one to bring that up. And I have this for both nitrogen concentration and phosphorus concentration. And you can see these shorter term stations, they start around 2005, 2006. But if I were to click on Towanda, which encompasses the entire watershed, it goes all the way back to 1985. We can see the decrease in nitrogen concentration and then a small increase in more recent times. Oh, we're back. I'm sorry about that. And it does take a second to load. All right. And so the last thing that I wanted to share, we saw the BMP implementation, the sediment loads and nutrient concentrations, and the non-tidal network monitoring stations. I do have these BAP scores, aquatic biological monitoring data. And these BAP scores they're from DEC's monitoring team for, I believe, streams monitoring team. And you can see whether or not the assessment that was done was indicated non-impacted, slightly impacted, moderately impacted, or severely impacted conditions. So I'll go ahead and click on one of these and it'll pull up the site ID, stream name, and if it's non-impacted, and the most recent assessment date when that was made. And so I did select, you can look at sites just after 2010. 2010 was included because it was the start of the TMDL. And some of these sites go all the way back to 1990, and they might not be as relevant as these more recent sites. So that's just for reference. And then I also have a few other reference layers on here. Let's see here, got to turn these off. And then if you go to the agricultural acres, we can look at the percent of the watershed that is agriculture. So for each HUC 10, the percent of the land use that's agriculture, and this comes from the phase 6 model has a 1 meter land use classification, land cover classification data set that's available. So that's where these ag lands, it's hay, pasture, and cropland. And so for one of these, you can see if I were to click on the watershed, it would pop up with another thing that you can copy and paste, that the West Branch Tagnoga River has 64,000 acres, of which 23,000, about 36% are agricultural land. The other layer I have on for reference is the percent agriculture within the RMZ. This RMZ is the riparian management zone, and it's 100 feet on either side of the stream or water body. And so with this, we're looking at what percent of that riparian management zone has agricultural land in it. And this could be used to help plan or find out where buffer implementation could be more effective in other stream BMPs. And so if I were to click on a watershed, you could see this one, this bottom paragraph, the riparian management area is about 5,000 acres, of which 1,500 acres, 31% is ag land. So this is based again on that phase 6 land cover. That's at 1 meter resolution. And then in addition to those, I just have reference layers like the HUC 12 subwatersheds if that's needed. I also have our water body inventory priority water body list. This is a DEC shapefile that has fact sheets for each water body on its current assessment score. And you can click on one of these watersheds and it'll pop up with the link for the fact sheet as well as what trib it is and what its most recent assessment is. This one is assessed as no known impact. So those are just for reference. I also have the Chesapeake Bay program, has a shapefile for most effective basins and underrepresented communities. These could be used for grants, as well as the NIFWIF business plan priority subwatersheds, which could also be used for NIFWIF grant reporting. And then I just have the civil service boundaries, which are good for finding out if a city or town or village is in or outside of the watershed. I've been using this quite often. And then a brook trout catchment. This is available from the Eastern Brook Trout Venture. They have a shapefile for the entire watershed that shows whether or not brook trout are present. And that's pretty much it for the dashboard. It'll be available hopefully soon on DEC's website on the Chesapeake Bay Watershed page. And I can take any questions.
Yep, so the main question in the chat was actually just asking about a link to the dashboard.
Yeah.
But Emily did answer, I think, so if you just want to verify that Emily's answer was correct, that this is still something you're working on and not quite ready for public consumption.
Yeah, it's very close. We had some of these BMP data is a little off. So once we get that corrected, I'm going to post it right away. And then I have a walkthrough that I've been working on so that you can see the data as it goes. So I was thinking about waiting till 2021 progress is going to be available, hopefully soon. And then just as that gets incorporated into this dashboard, I can publish the whole thing.
Awesome. People seem very excited for it. So as soon as you've got it ready, I'm sure there'll be folks ready to try it out. But at this point, guys, we have a chance for you to ask some questions. So you are welcome. If you'd like to ask your question yourself, you can use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and I will open up your microphone so you can talk directly to Cassie, or pop your questions right in the Q&A. All right, we've got one question that popped in here. Can you show which spot in the dashboard you export files from?
Yeah, so I don't currently have an export file feature on the dashboard. It's all an interactive dashboard that you can open up. But if you want any of the data that is available in the dashboard, I can make that available.
Wonderful, thank you. All right. Kathy, apparently your presentation was extremely thorough and folks don't have questions.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was a lot to cover, so I wanted to get to it all. So I hope I didn't go through it too fast, but I appreciate everyone coming today.
No, we're getting lots of good jobs and thank yous, and they're very excited for the tool. So
Great.
I guess, yeah, we can't be upset with that, right?
I'm sure
Well,
people will have questions too once it's live and they can play with it.
Absolutely, yes. And I'm going to say we'll hang out for just a second more if anyone else has a question, but thank you all so much. Let me share information about what's coming up next week for our next session of Watershed Wednesdays. So next week we actually have OCCA's own Danny Lappin. He will be talking about the Chesapeake Bay program for local governments and some of the work that he's been doing with that. So we invite you to join us next week at 9:30. And if any questions come up, please just let us know and we will make sure that Cassie gets them so she can answer things for you. And we look forward to seeing the dashboard come out live.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cassie.
Yes, thank you. Everyone have a wonderful day and see you next week.